Great to be here. Thank you so much. It's a topic very close to our hearts. For those of you that aren't familiar with Quorn, we're the world's largest producer of meat alternatives. We've been going for about 35 years. And I'd really like to take a little bit of a more holistic perspective. My background's health psychology, so I'd like to focus on some of the environmental implications as well as some of the nutritional implications of particularly meat alternatives in these new diets. So we know that dietary ethics play a massive role in the uptake of some of these diets, whether it's ethics around what healthy really means, animal welfare, or increasingly environmental concerns. And we kind of can't get away from some of these ethical arguments now. This is a headline that relates to the Eat Lancet Diet, if you're familiar with it, which recommends that we need to cut meat consumption in developed countries by a huge amount and that it will have huge implications for planetary stability and human health. I always like to show this image because I think it sums up some of the problems that we have created through our current food system. It's an aerial image from space of a feedlot in the States. I'm not saying that all farming is like this, but the fact is that if we are going to feed a growing population that consumes the level of meat that we're eating, we are going to require intensive style farms like this. And some of the beautiful colors that you see there are actually effluent runoffs from the animals that are here, which obviously go out to sea and contribute to other problems in ocean acidification and so on. So we are going to need to look to new food sources for protein and sustainable proteins in particular. At the moment, we get a lot of our protein from animals, and we do actually get a significant amount from plants anyway. There's still consumer uncertainty around the fact that we can get protein from plants and not animals, but there's also a kind of third category and a third kingdom of fungi as well, which is relevant to Quorn because we are not actually plant-based, which may be a bit of a surprise. But I think it offers us a different way of thinking about how we produce food and how we get away from systems like this. So this picture actually shows you the spores from Fusarium, which is the fungus that we ferment to produce our protein. And compared to this system, when we start with these spores, we can actually produce up to 45,000 tons of protein from those little dots. So it's a completely different way of approaching food production. Just to touch on environmental aspects very briefly, because I know we're all interested in nutrition here. But really, where we've come to as a business is the fact that we can't now separate these two issues. If we don't focus on climate change and climate issues as well as population health, then at some point one will affect the other negatively. We have to take these two into consideration at the same time. When we produce our protein and other fermented proteins that we see on the market now, we take a glucose source from wheat. We use that to ferment our fungus. It then produces a dough-like substance, which we knead very much like a bread dough, and we use freezing to create texture. What this enables us to do is take around 200,000 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere if you were to swap that for beef or other animal products. So all of a sudden you can see the huge benefits that swapping proteins can have for the environment, aside from animal welfare and ecological stability. But that's all well and good, but these proteins have to be healthy, and this is not the case for all alternative proteins, and it's not the case for all diets, so we do have to plan these well. In the case of mycoprotein, what we end up with is actually a complete source of protein, which, again, it tends to be seen as an impossible feat if you move to a vegetarian diet and look for a complete protein and food source. So that's quite unique. We also have around 6% fiber content. Naturally, we don't add any fiber into our products. And again, I think sometimes fiber is missed out in some of these conversations around what we can miss out of a vegetarian or a vegan diet. Actually, we can get a huge boost in some of the nutrients that are missing in the general population. Nice to hear about some of the micronutrient issues. Mycoprotein is actually a good source of zinc. Some coverage recently has been on choline as a nutrient, which I know isn't measured in the National Dietary Survey at the moment, but we're also a very high content protein for that as well. The World Economic Forum earlier this year actually produced a white paper on alternative proteins and some of the health effects that we can expect from swapping beef for different sources of protein. As you see, as we go across to the more plant-based meat alternative categories, mycoprotein, which is our key ingredient, actually comes out at a relative equal scale to beans and peas and wheat, actually, in terms of the relative reduction in risk of death and disease. This was an independent analysis. But we also partner with universities across the country to really understand the metabolic properties of our protein and make sure we're confident that it is healthy as well as sustainable. So we have a really exciting research program with Exeter looking at muscle building, which is important for sports nutrition, but also as we age and we have an aging population to address things like sarcopenia. So that's ongoing. And we also partner across other organizations. If you've ever had the Greg's vegan sausage roll, you've also consumed mycoprotein in a Quorn product. But we also partner with the Greg's Foundation to encourage better education in schools around how to adopt those diets in the best way possible. For the food industry, we really have a mandate to be looking across these issues in a much more holistic way from the next generation. I think we can see when we ask consumers why they follow these diets, environment is creeping up in terms of the motivational aspect. But actually, when we look at particular environments where we need to enable those sorts of diets, such as schools, there's less availability of these products that are seen as sustainable or vegetarian within school environments and the like. So we have some work to do there. This is kind of where we would like to get to. I know I'm running out of time, but we need to increase public awareness of some of the positives, I think. We hear a lot of scaremongering, there's a lot of consumer uncertainty. I think we need a lot more positive messaging about what some of these diets can really offer. And I think we need better regulation, particularly around innovation in the food space. So how do we actually encourage more meat alternatives that are fortified, that are nutritious, rather than just a straight swap for the sake of it? And collaboration, we're an incredibly collaborative business and always have been, and we're not going to fix any of these together. There's no silver bullet. And I will end there, and I'm very, very excited to hear your questions.